In 1961, a housewife in Ohio unplugged her oven for an entire summer and cooked every family dinner on one countertop appliance. Her electric skillet did it all. It fried, it simmered, it even baked a cake. Number 14 on this list fed 6 people for under $1. Number 3, she made without ever heating up the kitchen. These 25 forgotten skillet dinners fed a whole generation, then vanished the moment we bought bigger stoves. Hit that subscribe button and let us count down. Number 25, corn fritters. Before frozen sides took over the American freezer, a busy mom could turn a can of creamed corn into a hot supper in one shallow pan. She would beat an egg into flour, baking powder, and salt, fold in the corn, and drop spoonfuls into shimmering oil set to exactly 375 degrees on that little dial. The fritters puffed, golden and crisp at the edges, soft and sweet in the middle. A can of creamed corn cost about 15 cents in 1962, and the rest came straight from the pantry. Served with a drizzle of syrup or a pool of tomato gravy, these were dinner on nights when the paycheck was thin and the children were loud. The electric skillet held its heat steady, so the fritters never soaked up grease and turned soggy the way stovetop frying always risked. Mothers made a double batch, and the plate was empty before she sat down. Nobody writes this recipe down anymore. Number 24, fried bologna. Every refrigerator in working-class America had a roll of bologna in the door, and it cost about 45 cents a pound in the mid-1960s. But fried bologna was not a cold sandwich thrown together in a hurry. Mom cut thick slices, notched the edges with a paring knife so they would not curl into little bowls, and laid them flat in the skillet at 350 degrees. The bologna blistered and browned and swelled up in the center, filling the whole house with a smell that pulled children in from the yard. Served on soft white bread with yellow mustard and maybe a slice of American cheese melting underneath, this was a proper hot meal after a long shift. The wide, flat bottom of the electric skillet meant she could fry 6 slices at once, feeding the whole table in a single pass. There was no shame in it, because on Thursday nights, half the block was eating exactly the same thing. Number 23, frankfurters and skillet beans. When the month was longer than the money, a mom reached for a can of pork and beans and a package of hot dogs. She would slice the franks into thick coins, brown them right in the skillet until the edges caramelized, then pour the beans over the top with a spoonful of brown sugar, a squirt of mustard, and a splash of ketchup. 20 minutes at a low simmer, and the whole thing thickened into something sweet, smoky, and deeply filling. A package of frankfurters ran about 50 cents, a can of beans a dime, and this pot fed 4 hungry kids with cornbread on the side. The steady low heat meant she could set the dial, walk away, fold a basket of laundry, and come back to supper that had not scorched to the bottom. This was Monday night across 1,000 American kitchens, and it never once appeared in a fancy cookbook because it was too ordinary to write down. Number 22, creamed tuna on toast. Long before tuna casserole became the punchline of church potlucks, mothers made a quick, elegant supper by stirring flaked tuna into a white sauce right in the skillet. She melted butter, whisked in flour until it turned pale gold, poured in milk slowly until it thickened, then folded in a can of tuna and a handful of frozen peas. Ladled over crisp toast points, it looked like something you would order at a lunch counter. A can of tuna cost about 30 cents in 1963, and the peas came from a nickel bag in the freezer. The genius of the electric skillet here was heat control. A white sauce breaks and curdles the instant it gets too hot on a gas flame. But that thermostat held the pan at a gentle simmer, so the sauce stayed silky every single time. Children who swore they hated fish ate 2 helpings and never asked what was in it. Number 21. Spanish rice. This was the dish that made 1 pound of ground beef feed a family of 6 without anyone feeling cheated. Mom browned the beef with a chopped onion and a green pepper, then poured in raw rice, a can of tomatoes, and a cup of water, clamped the lid on, and let the whole thing steam at low heat until the rice drank up every drop of that tomato broth. Ground beef ran about 55 cents a pound, and a cup of rice cost pennies, so this pot cost less than $1 and left leftovers for lunch. The rice doubled the volume of the meat, and the tomatoes turned the whole thing bright and savory. The tight-fitting lid of the electric skillet trapped the steam perfectly, cooking the rice evenly without a single burnt spot on the bottom. Every forkful had beef, rice, and pepper in it. This sat on weeknight tables from Texas to Michigan, and today it has been replaced by a seasoning packet that costs more than the whole meal used to. Number 20. Porcupine meatballs. The name made children laugh, and the trick behind it made mothers geniuses. She mixed raw rice right into the ground beef, along with an egg, onion, and salt, rolled the mixture into balls, and simmered them in tomato sauce in the skillet. As they cooked, the rice grains swelled and poked out of the meatballs like little quills, which is where the name came from. But the real magic was economy. The rice stretched a single pound of beef into enough meatballs to feed the whole family. A pound of beef, a handful of rice, a can of tomato sauce, and supper cost about 70 cents. The electric skillet held a steady, low simmer for the 45 minutes it took the rice to cook through, and the tight lid kept everything tender and moist. Served over mashed potatoes or just eaten from the bowl, these were the meatballs of the Depression generation, passed down to their daughters, who cooked them on shiny new appliances but never forgot why they worked. First pattern break. Here is where the story gets interesting, because the electric skillet was not just a pan. It was a quiet revolution sitting on the counter. Before it arrived, a mother cooking for 6 was chained to a hot gas stove, watching flames she could never fully trust, fighting hot spots and cold spots and scorched bottoms. Then, in the early 1950s, appliance companies added something simple and life-changing: a thermostat. Suddenly, a dial could hold 300 degrees, or 375 degrees, or a bare simmer without wavering. A woman could set the temperature, snap on the lid, and walk away to help with homework or hang the wash. The skillet freed her hands and her attention in a way nothing in the kitchen ever had. It fried, braised, stewed, steamed, and baked, all in one pan that washed up in one basin. In the summer, it cooked dinner without turning the whole house into an oven. It was independence you could plug into the wall, and for millions of busy mothers, it changed everything. Number 19. Ham and scalloped potatoes. Sunday's ham never went to waste in a house that understood money. By Wednesday, the last bits of it went into the skillet, layered with thin-sliced potatoes, chopped onion, and a milk sauce thickened with flour and butter. The lid went on, the dial went to low, and 40 minutes later the potatoes had gone soft and creamy, bound together with salty threads of ham. A few cents of leftover meat and a bag of potatoes made a casserole that tasted like it took all afternoon. The electric skillet did what an oven casserole did, but faster and without heating the whole kitchen in July. Mothers pulled the crispy edges up from the sides of the pan and fought over them the same way. This was thrift, dressed up as comfort, and it fed families who never once thought of themselves as poor because the table was always full. Number 18. Corned beef hash. A can of corned beef cost about 40 cents, and in the hands of a capable mom, it became a supper that men asked for by name. She diced cold-boiled potatoes, chopped an onion, broke the corned beef apart with a fork, and pressed the whole mixture flat into the hot skillet. The secret was patience. She let it sit undisturbed until a deep brown crust formed on the bottom, then flipped it in sections so every bite had crunch. A couple of eggs cracked right on top and covered with the lid until the white set, turned it into a complete meal. The wide, flat surface of the electric skillet was made for exactly this, giving the hash room to spread out and crisp instead of steaming in a crowded pot. Served with ketchup and a slice of bread, this was Saturday morning and Tuesday night both. Today, it comes frozen in a bag, a pale imitation of what a woman with a can opener and 40 cents could build. Number 17, American chop suey. Despite the name, there was nothing Chinese about it. This was elbow macaroni, ground beef, onion, green pepper, and a can of tomato soup, all cooked together in one skillet until the noodles drank up the sauce. Mom browned the beef, threw in the vegetables, added the macaroni and tomato with enough water to cook it through, and clamped on the lid. 15 minutes later, supper was done, and there was only one pan to wash. Ground beef at 55 cents a pound and a box of macaroni at a dime made this a meal that fed 6 for around 80 cents. In New England, they called it American chop suey. In the Midwest, they called it goulash, and in half the country, they just called it hamburger and noodles. Whatever the name, it was the weeknight workhorse of the electric skillet era, the meal a tired mother could make with her eyes half closed, and the leftovers tasted even better the next day. Number 16, chow mein. When a mother wanted her family to feel like they were eating something exotic on a Tuesday, she reached for a can of la choy and her skillet. She browned ground pork or leftover chicken, stirred in celery, onion, and a can of bean sprouts, thickened it with a little cornstarch and soy sauce, and served the whole steaming mess over crunchy canned noodles. To a family in Kansas in 1964, this was practically international travel. A can of vegetables and a bit of leftover meat cost almost nothing, and the crunchy noodles on top made children feel like they were getting a treat. The electric skillet's even heat kept the vegetables crisp instead of turning them to mush, which was the whole point. It was not authentic anything, but it was fast, it was cheap, and it broke the endless rotation of beef and potatoes. Mothers felt sophisticated serving it, and that feeling was worth every penny of the can. Number 15, Salisbury steak. This was the dish that turned the cheapest ground beef into something that looked like a restaurant dinner. Mom mixed the beef with breadcrumbs, an egg, and a spoonful of onion soup mix, shaped it into oval patties, and browned them in the skillet. Then she made a gravy right in the same pan from the drippings, a spoonful of flour, and a can of beef broth, or a bouillon cube dissolved in water. The patties went back in, the lid went on, and they simmered until the gravy turned thick and glossy. Served over mashed potatoes, this was Salisbury steak, the poor man's steak dinner that fed factory workers and school teachers alike. A pound of beef made 4 patties for about 55 cents, and the gravy stretched it to feel like a feast. The one-pan method meant the browning and the gravy happened in the same buttery drippings, which is exactly why it tasted better than the frozen dinner version that carried the same name. Number 14, smothered pork chops. Thin, cheap pork chops that would turn to shoe leather under a broiler became fork tender in the electric skillet. Mom dredged the chops in seasoned flour, browned them hard on both sides at 350 degrees Fahrenheit, then turned the dial way down, poured in a mixture of milk and the leftover flour, and let them smother under the lid for 45 minutes. That long, low, gentle heat broke down the tough meat and built a rich onion gravy at the same time. Pork chops cost about 65 cents a pound in the early 1960s, and the thin ones were cheapest of all, which is exactly why this technique existed. The steady thermostat was the whole secret. Too hot, and the chops seized up tough. Too cool, and the gravy never thickened, but that dial held the perfect low simmer with no babysitting. Served over rice or potatoes, with the gravy poured thick over everything, this was Sunday quality food on a Wednesday budget. Before we get to number 13, if you want to actually cook these at home, you can grab our cookbook bundles on our website. Pause to scan the QR code on the screen or click the link in the description or the pinned comment below. Number 13, Sloppy Joes. Long before it came in a can with a smiling label, mothers made Sloppy Joes from scratch in one skillet in about 15 minutes. She browned a pound of ground beef with onion and green pepper, drained the fat, then stirred in ketchup, a spoonful of brown sugar, a dash of mustard, and a little Worcestershire, letting it all bubble down into a thick, tangy, sweet sauce. Spooned onto a soft hamburger bun, it was messy, filling, and beloved by every child who ever sat at a kitchen table. A pound of beef fed the whole family for around 55 cents, and every ingredient was already in the pantry. The wide skillet gave the meat room to brown properly instead of steaming gray in a crowded pot, and that browning was the difference between flavor and blandness. Food companies eventually sold this exact recipe back to mothers in a can for triple the price, betting we would forget how simple it always was. Most of us did. Second pattern break. Here is something no cooking show ever talks about honestly. The 1960s mom was not cooking for pleasure most nights. She was cooking against the clock. She had a husband coming home hungry at 6 o'clock, 3 or 4 children with homework and scraped knees, a house that needed cleaning, and often a part-time job on top of it all. She did not have time to dirty 6 pans and stand over a stove for 2 hours. The electric skillet was not a luxury to her. It was survival. It was the appliance that let her start dinner at 5 o'clock, set the temperature, and use those 45 minutes to be a mother instead of a short-order cook. Every dish on this list was chosen for one reason above all others. It could be made in one pan with cheap ingredients, without constant attention, by a woman who was doing 5 other things at the same time. These were not gourmet recipes. They were engineering. They were how an entire generation of exhausted women fed their families with dignity, and we owe them more credit than we ever gave. Number 12, hamburger stroganoff. Real beef stroganoff took expensive tenderloin and a careful hand, but the busy mom's version took a pound of ground beef and a can of soup, and honestly, her family liked it better. She browned the beef with onion and sliced mushrooms, stirred in a can of cream of mushroom soup and a scoop of sour cream, and let it warm through without ever coming to a boil. Poured over egg noodles, it was creamy, rich, and tasted far more expensive than the 60 cents it cost to make. The trick was the temperature. Sour cream curdles the second it gets too hot, but the electric skillet's low setting held it just warm enough to stay silky. This appeared on dinner tables from coast to coast, a little taste of luxury built from the cheapest meat in the case. Children who grew up on it still make it, and half of them have no idea the real version even exists. Theirs was always the real one anyway. Number 11, pepper steak. Thin strips of cheap round steak became a company-worthy dinner in the skillet. Mom cut the beef against the grain into strips, browned them fast in hot oil, then added onion, green pepper strips, and a sauce of soy, a little sugar, and cornstarch to thicken. A few minutes of stir-frying and the peppers were crisp tender, the beef glossy and savory, the whole thing ready to spoon over rice. A pound of round steak cost less than $1 and fed the family with rice, stretching it further. The high, even heat of the electric skillet was perfect for the quick searing this needed. cooking the beef fast so it stayed tender instead of stewing tough. This was the meal that made a modest cut of meat feel special, and it carried a whiff of the sophisticated, faraway cooking that magazines were just starting to show American housewives. Mom felt a little worldly serving it, and her family felt a little spoiled eating it. Number 10. Chicken fricassee. This was the meal that turned a tough old stewing hen into something tender enough to melt. Mom browned the cut-up chicken pieces in the skillet, then added onion, carrot, and enough water or broth to come halfway up, clamped on the lid, and let it simmer low for an hour until the meat fell from the bone. Then she thickened the broth into a rich, pale gravy right in the pan. A stewing hen was the cheapest bird in the case, often half the price of a young fryer, because it needed exactly this kind of long, gentle cooking to become edible. The electric skillet delivered that steady, low heat for as long as it took. No flame to watch, no scorching. Served over biscuits or noodles, chicken fricassee was Sunday dinner and sick day comfort both. It was the meal a mother made when a neighbor lost someone, carried over in a covered pan because it said care in a way words never could. Number 9. Liver and onions. Food companies would rather you forgot this one because beef liver was one of the most nutritious things a family could eat, and it cost about 30 cents a pound. Butchers practically gave it away. Mom sliced it thin, dredged it in flour, and laid it in the hot skillet while onions caramelized alongside. The whole trick was timing. Liver cooks in 2 minutes a side, and 1 minute too long turns it tough and bitter, which is exactly why a generation grew up hating it. Done right, on that precisely controlled heat, it was mild, rich, and tender, the outside crisp and golden, the inside just faintly pink, buried under a mountain of sweet, soft onions. Packed with iron and B12 and protein, it kept working families strong on almost no money. The steady thermostat took the guesswork out of the timing that ruined it so often on a wild gas flame. We stopped making it when we could afford to. The knowledge left. The nutrition never went anywhere. Number 8. Cube steak and milk gravy. Cube steak was the cheapest steak in the store because it was tough meat run through a machine that pounded it tender. But in the skillet, it became a country-fried supper worthy of any diner. Mom dredged the steaks in seasoned flour, fried them crisp and golden in hot oil, then set them aside and built a milk gravy from the drippings, a spoonful of flour, and a good pour of milk, scraping up every browned bit stuck to the pan. A pound of cube steak cost around 65 cents, and the gravy stretched it over a whole plate of mashed potatoes. This was chicken fried steak, before most of the country called it that, the taste of a southern kitchen made on a northern countertop. The electric skillet's flat bottom and even heat gave the coating a perfect crust, and its steady warmth held the gravy at the exact simmer it needed to thicken. Cheap, crispy, smothered, and gone in minutes. Third, pattern break. Here is what the frozen dinner companies did not want mothers to understand. Every meal on this list was built from ingredients no store could ever mark up very much. Ground beef, potatoes, onions, dried beans, canned tomatoes, cheap cuts of meat, a bag of rice. There is no advertising budget behind an onion. There is no brand loyalty in a sack of potatoes. The profit hiding in a can of tomatoes is measured in pennies. So the companies did something clever. They took these exact recipes, the sloppy Joe, the stroganoff, the hamburger and noodles, and they sold them back to us in boxes and cans and freezer bags for triple the price, wrapped in the promise that we were too busy to cook. But the busiest women who ever lived, the mothers of the 1960s working 2 jobs and raising 5 children, made these meals from scratch in 15 minutes in a single pan. We did not buy convenience. We bought forgetting. And forgetting is the most expensive thing a kitchen ever purchased. Number 7. City chicken. Here is a dish whose name is a joke that got lost. City chicken contains no chicken at all. Back when chicken was expensive and pork was cheap, mothers cubed pork, and sometimes veal, threaded it onto small wooden skewers, breaded it, and fried it in the skillet to look like little chicken drumsticks. City folks who could not afford real poultry ate this instead, hence the name. Mom browned the skewers on all sides, then covered the skillet and let them steam braise on low until the pork was cooked through and tender. Cheap pork made an impressive-looking platter that fooled the eye and filled the belly. The electric skillet was perfect for it, searing the breadcrumb coating crisp and then holding the gentle finishing heat under the lid. Popular across the industrial cities of the Midwest, especially in Polish and immigrant neighborhoods, city chicken was working-class ingenuity you could hold in your hand. Today, almost nobody remembers it existed or why a dish with no chicken carried that name. Number 6. American goulash. Not the Hungarian original with paprika and slow-braised beef, but the American weeknight version that fed millions. Mom browned ground beef with onion and garlic, poured in canned tomatoes and tomato sauce, stirred in elbow macaroni and water, and let the whole pot simmer under the lid until the pasta was tender and had soaked up the sauce. 1 pound of beef, 1 box of macaroni, a couple cans of tomato, and supper cost under $1 and fed everyone twice. It was thick, rich, deeply comforting, and it tasted even better reheated the next day when the noodles had drunk in every bit of flavor. The single skillet method meant the beef browned, the sauce built, and the pasta cooked all in the same pan, so the whole thing carried one deep, unified flavor. Children begged for it. It has no fancy name and needs none. It was the meal that said, no matter how tight the week is, everyone at this table eats until they are full. Number 5. Pineapple upside-down cake. Here is the one that surprises people. Mothers baked cakes in their electric skillets, and this was the showstopper. Mom melted butter and brown sugar in the bottom of the pan, arranged pineapple rings and maraschino cherries in the syrup, poured cake batter over the top, and clamped on the domed lid. Set to a low, even bake, the skillet turned into an oven, and 30 minutes later she flipped the whole thing out to reveal a golden cake with glistening caramelized fruit on top. In the sweltering heat of a July afternoon, she made dessert without ever turning on the real oven and roasting the family out of the house. A can of pineapple cost about 25 cents, and the cherries were a nickel splurge. This was the cake that showed up at church suppers and birthday tables, proof that a good mother could conjure something beautiful from a countertop appliance. People today do not believe you could bake a cake in a frying pan. The 1960s, Mom knew better. Number 4, skillet lasagna. Real lasagna meant a hot oven for an hour and a stack of pans to wash. Luxuries a busy mother on a summer night did not have, so she made it in the skillet instead. She browned the beef, layered in broken-up lasagna noodles, jarred or homemade tomato sauce, and dollops of cottage cheese and mozzarella, added a little water, and let it all simmer under the lid until the noodles softened and the cheese melted into the sauce. It had every flavor of the baked version, the meat, the tomato, the layers of cheese, without heating the kitchen to 90 degrees. A pound of beef and a box of noodles fed the family for about $1. The steady low heat of the electric skillet cooked the raw noodles right in the sauce, a trick that only worked because that thermostat held a perfect, gentle simmer. It looked like she had labored all afternoon. She had labored for 20 minutes and washed one pan. Number 3. Swiss steak. This was the dish that turned the toughest, cheapest cut in the butcher's case into a fork-tender Sunday dinner on a Tuesday. Mom took a thick round steak, pounded seasoned flour into both sides with the edge of a plate, and browned it hard in the skillet. Then she buried it under sliced onions and a can of tomatoes, turned the dial way down, snapped on the lid, and walked away for an hour and a half. That long, low, moist braise broke down the tough connective tissue until the meat surrendered, and the tomatoes and onions are cooked down into a rich, savory gravy. Round steak was among the cheapest cuts because it needed exactly this treatment to become edible, and the electric skillet supplied the patient unwavering heat it required. She could start it, leave to run errands or help with homework, and come home to a house that smelled like a proper roast. Served over mashed potatoes, Swiss steak fed families like royalty on a pauper's budget. Number 2. Smothered chicken. Before boneless breasts took over America, mothers cooked whole cut-up chickens, and the electric skillet made the cheapest bird taste like the finest. Mom dredged the pieces in seasoned flour, browned them deep and golden in butter, then lowered the heat, poured in a milk or broth gravy built from the drippings, and let the chicken smother under the lid until it was falling off the bone and swimming in rich gravy. A whole chicken, cut into pieces, stretched across the whole family, and the gravy poured over rice or biscuits made sure nothing on the plate went dry. The genius was that single pan where the browning and the smothering happened in the same seasoned drippings, layering flavor no separate steps could match. This was the chicken of Sunday dinners and hard weeknights alike, the meal that made a mother look like a magician. It was comfort you could smell from the driveway, and it meant someone in that house still had the time and love to cook. Number 1. Fried chicken. At the top of the list sits the dish the electric skillet was practically invented for. Its deep, even, thermostatically controlled heat did the one thing home cooks could never reliably do on a gas flame. It held oil at a steady 350 degrees, so the chicken cooked through to the bone without burning the crust or leaving the inside raw. Mom soaked the pieces in buttermilk, dredged them heavy in seasoned flour, and lowered them into the shimmering oil, and that dial did the rest. The crust turned deep golden and shattering crisp. The meat inside stayed juicy, and the whole kitchen filled with a smell that meant something good was about to happen. A whole cut-up chicken fed the family, and the cheapest bird tasted like a feast. This was Sunday dinner, Friday night, the church picnic, the meal that said the family was doing all right. Every culture that came to America brought a version of fried chicken, and the electric skillet finally let every busy mother make it perfectly every single time. Nothing on this list was made with more love or eaten with more joy. Here is my challenge. Make one of these this week. Just one. The Swiss steak, the porcupine meatballs, the smothered chicken. Then come back and tell me if your grandmother knew something we forgot. Drop the one you are going to try in the comments, because these were never just quick dinners. They were how a whole generation of tired, resourceful women fed their families with almost nothing and made it taste like everything.